Hello, welcome to Let's Talk Science's Declassified STEM Survival Guide podcast. My name is Audrey.
And my name is Ramir.
And the goal of this podcast is to talk about the possible career paths one can take in the field of STEM and the challenges one may face in navigating the STEM world.
Welcome, everybody, to our fourth episode of the six-part series, the Med Survival Guide, our season 2 of our podcasts. In this episode, we will be talking about what it's like to be a second-year medical student.
So just a disclaimer, the experiences of our guests today are not a reflection of all medical students who get into medical school. Everyone has different experiences, and it doesn't mean that you have to follow the exact path our guests took to get accepted into medical school.
Right, and if you are thinking about applying to the College of Medicine at the University of Manitoba, we did link the program requirements bulletin in the description of this episode for your reference for a more thorough explanation from the College of Medicine at the U of M.
So our guests today include second-year med students from the College of Medicine at the Rady Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Manitoba, Ian Fast and Amandeep Singh.
So Ian majored in biochemistry at the U of W. He has been a Let's Talk Science volunteer since September 2020.
And before starting medicine, Amandeep did a Bachelor of Science degree, a genetics major, and a master's degree in biochemistry and medical genetics. And during his Bachelor of Science degree, Aman actually volunteered a lot with Student Life and Let's Talk Science.
All right. That being said, how is everyone doing today?
Yeah, whoever wants.
Yeah. How's Sorry, yeah. I don't think you have audio, Ian.
Oh no, is it not working?
Oh, now it's working.
Now it's working. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. You're doing good though? You're doing all right?
I'm doing great.
Awesome.
Saturday afternoon.
How about you, Aman? How are you?
I'm good. I woke up at 11 a.m. today, so
Just
good.
Time.
That's always nice.
Just in time.
Yeah.
Just in time. I woke up at like 10 a.m. and we actually had we recorded our first episode of this series this morning. So this is the second recording today. We got 3 recordings set up for today. So it's going to be a busy day today.
Yeah. So thank you guys for joining us today. I just like to, first of all, I'm curious, Ian, would you consider yourself a good cook?
Well, I hope so. If I've made a lot of customers very unhappy if I'm not good at it. That was what I did as a career before I moved into medicine. I didn't start going to med school till I was 27, and I was a chef up until that point. So,
that is interesting.
Yeah.
So, some people might look at that as like, oh, that's very late. Some people are very young starting their careers. So just to clarify, after graduating, so you graduated culinary school and you were a chef first in California, correct?
Yeah. So the order of my education is a little bit strange. So I'll just break. Yeah. So I graduated high school and went to the University of Winnipeg, and that's where I majored in biochemistry. But all through high school, I was working in kitchens. Through my undergrad, I was working in kitchens. And when I graduated, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I knew that I loved to cook. And I knew that it was something that I was very interested in. And so I decided to go to culinary school after I was done my biochem degree. So then that was 2 years long. And after that, I was a chef in a few different restaurants in California and Arizona and Winnipeg and Ontario. And I just ultimately decided that it was something that I love to do as a hobby, but not as a career. And the whole time I was just thinking, what if I used that biochem degree to go to medicine? And as the years went by, I became more and more interested in finding out the answer to that, and eventually just realized I can cook for myself for fun. And it doesn't need to be my job. And so then I decided to go into medicine, and I love it.
Wow. Very different, route indeed. Mm-hmm. What about yourself, Aman? Would you say you're a good cook?
I wouldn't say good cook, but I can make like simple stuff for myself if If I ever need to like pasta, grilled cheese sandwiches, I love those.
pasta.
Yes.
I love pasta.
And then like simple things, I just watch YouTube videos.
True.
True.
But, like-
Everything's on YouTube.
Yeah, not like Ian though. He's got it all down. He teaches us in our class.
Well, I mean, you definitely know a lot more about genetics than I do. So,
There you go. It's a win-win for both of you guys.
Yeah.
What about you, Audrey? Would you say you're a good cook?
I mean, I really like baking. I'd say my specialty is like banana bread and like chocolate chip cookies, but I'm not like that great of a cook. I'd say I'm more of a baker than a cook. I'd say. What about you, Ramir?
Yeah. Oh, me. Okay. Let me tell you. No, not at all. That is not my forte. I just let whoever else is in the room cook the food for. Well, I can cook. Let's see here. There's this pancit canton. You guys know what pancit is?
It's a
like
Filipino
dish. It's just noodles, but it's like easy to cook. It's basically like pasta. So you just
so you can boil noodles.
you just boil. Yeah, I can boil noodles. That's
Yeah.
like, that's I would say that's very adept
skill.
cooking, But I also like, what I do know is, do you guys know what polvoron is?
I do not.
It's like a Spanish tree. It's like a candy, and it's made of, I think it's peanuts. I'm not really sure how to describe it because it's
Yeah.
not your usual candy,
Mhm.
but it's very soft,
It's crumbly.
yeah.
Mhm.
But if you guys have the chance to look it up, it's definitely a delicacy. Is it a delicacy? Is that a good?
I don't know, but it's really common in the Philippines. I think as
Yeah.
a snack to eat. Mhm.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to make.
Keep my eyes peeled for it, or maybe one day I'll.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Aman, so you did your master's degree in specifically it was biochemistry and medical genetics. How has that helped you in applying and studying for medicine? And this question actually comes from Revneet Bra, who's one of our LTS volunteers.
So after my bachelor's, I think so when you go to master's from like a science bachelor's, you don't really learn like any new theoretical stuff. You just like learn to synthesize like all the literature that's around a certain topic. And I would say like doing that during my master's has helped like studying in medicine, because medicine is also like very broad. In first 2 years, you learn so many different things, and having that knowledge base of like how to synthesize all that knowledge to take like the important points out of it does help a lot. And I feel like it has helped me a lot. And that's like me judging from like what others' experience has been who have not had that luxury yet.
Oh, awesome. That's really interesting. So this next question is for both of you. What or who inspired you to pursue a career in medicine? Either of you can take this question.
I can go first. So for me, there was never really like one moment where I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. It was just ever since I was a little kid, I've just always been really fascinated in science. And I was always took all the science classes I could. They were my favorite classes. I watched exclusively Discovery Channel when I was a little kid. And I found that every time I learned about something new about how the human body worked, I was like just blown away, and it was so interesting. And so for me, it was just, I think it's the thing that I could go into that I just find the most interesting. And every time that I learn something new, I find it cool and neat. And so, yeah, so it's the thing that I find the most interesting. And that's what directed me into it.
I was also a lot like Ian growing up. I was interested in science from like the get-go, but I was interested in like everything. I loved bio, I loved chemistry, I loved physics, I loved math. So when I was growing up, every day it was something different. One day I wanted to be a pilot, the other day I wanted to be a doctor, and then the next day it's something else, like a scientist or something. And then I think what tipped me towards medicine was like this one story that I heard from my dad. It was about like this one guy, since I'm like religiously Sikh, it was a story about this one guy who was he was like a doctor in like a battle. He was a sick doctor, so like you would expect him to like tend to the sick soldiers, but when he was there and he saw all these wounded soldiers, he didn't care like who they were, what side they were fighting for. If he saw anyone who wanted water or who needed some medical help, he would just go help them. And then it was like the other like soldiers on like his side complained to the king, like this person is helping the enemies. And then when he was brought to the king, he told the king, well, when I'm out there and I see these people struggling, I don't see enemy or friends. All I see are humans who need help, and I have the ability to help them. So that's what I'm doing. And that story like really like stuck with me since then. So as I like move forward in my studies, I think it sort of shaped my interest more towards medicine. It wasn't like in one go, but like over time, I just moved more and more towards that goal.
Oh, that's a great story.
That's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I took a class in high school called World Religion. So it's basically we talked about all of the religions in the world that's, without any bias, just in general. So I learned a little bit about Sikhism as well. And I think just every religion is pretty interesting. And that's definitely a story that I kind of want to look up now. It's pretty interesting and pretty inspiring as well. And now I just like to talk about, I think I said in the first episode, the big elephant in the room. It's this virus. I don't know. Is it real? Is it a hoax? What is it? Like, as we know, we're in a pandemic right now due to COVID-19, right? And I've mentioned in previous episodes that I personally struggled with, adjusting to the new norm, as they call it. Being in school, you're not in campus anymore. You're not, even your tests are online, virtual, and it's hard to simply get in touch with your profs, right? Just their office hours are different. What challenges have you guys faced academically, especially now that you're in your second year of med school in particular? Can you talk a little bit about the challenges that the pandemic has brought to you guys?
Yeah, so I guess if you want to simplify it as best as you can, first year med school is where you learn how the body's supposed to work. You learn the correct way that everything's supposed to go. And then in second year med school, that's when you start learning about all the different diseases and how to treat them and what they look like. And so a big part of second year med school is getting a chance to go into the hospital and get to assess patients who actually have the conditions that you're learning about so that you can get a better understanding of it. And I think that in the pandemic, that's been something that has really just had to be sacrificed. And a lot of that has been postponed, and we're going to make it up in the future, or some of the things just had to be canceled because they just weren't possible. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult to learn about things when you're just learning it by reading about it or seeing videos of it, and you can't really get in there and get hands-on. We've got loads of hands-on experience coming up in the next 2 years, so it's okay, but it definitely made learning a little bit more difficult.
True, and I do believe also that hands-on learning is, I think they describe it as, some people describe it as active learning, right? It's the best way to learn. So
it just helps them stick.
True. What about you, Aman?
Just like piggyback on Ian's comment, I remember like first year we had like, when we were still on campus, we were having this in-person sessions, And now if I compare like what I learned in those sessions to stuff that we learned like online that we couldn't learn in person, I still remember the first year stuff, like without even like going over it again better than like the second year stuff. If I go over it like a day before something, like I would still remember the first year stuff better. It's just, I feel like I just remember stuff better in person. So that's like the big challenge that the pandemic has been for our learning.
Yeah, it's been very challenging for a lot of students on online. It's just not the same having that hands-on experience and actually getting to talk to your prof after class and ask questions right away. Yeah, but despite the challenges, are there any benefits to having classes online?
There's definitely some, it's much, much more convenient. You can work your schedule around online classes much more easily. Now everything just gets automatically recorded. And so, we have mandatory classes and optional classes, and it just, you can watch the optional like pre-recorded lectures at a later time. So it's definitely more convenient. It's nice, but on the flip side, you wind up never leaving your home.
Yeah.
It's definitely easier to get to an early morning session if the session is on your couch than if the session is halfway across the city.
But I also find it challenging when it is an early morning class and you just want to sleep in and then you don't wake up early enough.
It's also easier to sleep in when your bed is right here. So.
And it's easy to convince yourself like, well, I can just stay in bed and have my computer open and be watching the lecture, but it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
You're not really watching the lecture.
I usually just snooze off when I try to do that in bed.
I did it one time and it failed. And so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, do you guys have a chance to have any labs in person during second year?
So when the pandemic was still like red hot, we basically didn't have anything on campus. But now, as it's gotten a little better now, we've started to have more on-campus stuff. It's still like maybe once a week, and if that, it's more like once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks that we go on campus for like on-campus lab stuff or like practical stuff. But it's better than nothing. Plus, we get to like see each other again, say hi. So that's always nice too.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, not seeing all of the people, I think one of the things that makes our experience different than, the people who are just finishing up first year right now is that we at least got the chance to meet each other and during orientation and get to know each other and become friends. So, that's something that I found at least really helped getting through first year med school is you've just got all these you're surrounded by people who are going through the same craziness as you. So I feel for the people that got into med school right during the pandemic and didn't really get the chance to meet, because I think that would have made first year a lot more challenging. That's the thing that I miss the most about going to school is you just get to be surrounded by a bunch of people who share a ton of common interests with you. That's why you're all in the same place. And it's a good environment.
Absolutely. I think it goes the same with, high school students transitioning this year to university, first year university, right? So, but you guys will have your time. I promise you'll have fun, hopefully. Crossing my fingers. But I just like to ask, you guys are in your second year of med school, of course, as we have mentioned. What was, a lot of people would say are intimidated by med school because they say takes too long or it's too much. There's this expression that describes the workload as it's kind of like drinking water out of a fire hydrant. How true is that? Like, did you have that same expectation coming into med school? And especially now you're in second year, did you still have that mentality as well, transitioning from first year to second year med school? And if you did, then how did you manage to change the mindset or handle the situation?
All right, I'll go. I'll go first. I definitely can relate to that fire hydrant analogy when first year of med school started and everything first started, because like what Aman was saying about having that opportunity to like be like at a high level of education workload going into it. I came from a background of, I was a chef, so I was used to working very hard, but like I was, I'd been out of the actively doing a ton of school for quite some time. So I wasn't even used to studying at all. And so I came in and it was a ton of work and it took a very long time to get adjusted to it. But you really, over time, you can get adjusted to it. It's a slow process, but then it just gets to the point where you can learn very, very quickly, and you can get through things much more easily. And I think that that's one of the reasons that I found second year med school to be a lot better workload wise, is because you're used to the workload now. And so you can learn quickly and your study habits are a lot better. And so it's sort of, I think it's probably a little bit more work or a similar amount of work, but you've learned to study better and you've learned how to do med school. And so it makes it a bit easier of a year.
Yeah, I think I'll echo Ian's point about it all depends on where you come from. So since I came directly from finishing my master's, like if I compare the two, masters was more busy and like more work for me than med school so far. So adjusting for me was easier. I did have like these like crazy expectations that it'd be like much more busy than like what I was used to, but it wasn't the case. But I think that's to the fact that most people who enter med school enter straight from undergrad. So that's like, those are the views that you usually hear. But then, yeah, it depends on like where you come from. And it actually does get easier. Like even for me, like starting off was like okay, but then it did get easier because I got more used to like how to study in medicine. But then it also depends on like your personality as a student, because it's very competitive to get in. So some people after they get in still have that mindset of like staying competitive, getting the 90 plus, and then like that A+ equivalent of undergrad. I feel like if you have that mindset in medicine, it might be more work for you because you have to know a lot more. But it's 60 to pass every course. As long as you get 60%, it's pass or fail. So you can take it easier on yourself and focus on like the practical stuff more, because that's gonna help a lot more in like the final 2 years. So it's all just a matter of like where you come from and what kind of personality you have towards like studying.
Interesting. And Ian, I just like to mention, I mean, I'm very familiar with the restaurant business, because I work as a server actually, and a bartender. Make Caesar's Long Island's. Okay, anyways, but I do agree that there's definitely a major difference between the two, and I can only imagine that you coming from culinary school and then working without studying for some time, right? So, but I'd just like to ask, how would you say that how you manage your time was there a difference on how you manage your time in undergrad compared to where you are right now in second year med school?
Honestly, I don't really think that there's much of a difference in how I manage my time, because it's all about, you just have to be aware of what your responsibilities are and make sure that you get everything done in the amount of time that you need to. And I tend to be a procrastinator and leave things till the last minute. And so, I still do that now. It's just in undergrad, I could leave things till like the very last minute. Whereas now in med school, there's just so much stuff that, the last minute is a few days before it would be, in undergrad. So, and I try a lot harder to keep up on things, because it can really start to pile up quickly. All of our classes are cut into like the shortest block would be a 2-week block. The longest, I think we had one that was 7. But for those chunks of time, we're just learning about one thing. So it's sort of like if you imagine you take undergrad first semester biology and sandwich it into a 3-week period, it's really easy to get really, really far behind really quickly. So you kind of just got to stay on the ball with things. Yeah, best advice is just keep on things, and then it's really, really laid back. Like I know that there's a pandemic, and so there's not a lot of socializing going on. But even in first year, it was a ton of work. But I wasn't glued to my computer 14 hours a day studying. Like I had a perfectly normal life and saw people as much as anybody else does. It's quite manageable. It's not that overwhelming.
True. And then just a comment on that last minute in undergrad. I definitely agree. Last minute is literally last minute for me in my last lab in microbiology. And we had to submit this assignment. And then I was discussing it with my group. And then I was changing some stuff. And then it was due 11:59. So I submitted it 11:58. So and a lesson there.
Once or twice in med school, but it's more difficult to pull off.
Oh yeah, you have to be really elite at procrastinating. But yeah, the lesson is, guys, once your prof gives you an assignment, just do it. Like don't wait last minute.
Yeah.
Instructions, so you know what you're putting off. The worst is when you leave something to the last minute and then you read the instructions and go, oh no,
that's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really bad.
What about for yourself, Aman?
Well, I'm also a procrastinator. So I also leave things until like the manageable time at the end.
We have a lot of things in common, right?
Oh yeah. I think a lot of us have that in common in our class, not gonna lie. But it's all manageable. So how I try to go about it is it's because our courses are like based on like number of weeks. I try to make sure that I'm caught up to each respective week by the weekend. So even if, let's say, I don't study for like 2 days during the week, I still try to make up for it during the weekend by like putting an extra couple of hours, just to make sure like I have like that week covered, and then moving on to like next week, it's all new stuff, and I don't have to worry about like the last week at all. So that's how I like to do it. It doesn't always work out. Like that's like the perfect scenario for me. But it doesn't always work out that way. But I still manage to do like more than like half a week, like the same week. So that helps a lot.
That's what I always try to do. I'm rarely successful at it, but that's
Yeah.
If you can pull it off.
Yeah, procrastination is it's easy to fall into.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, Audrey.
Yeah.
But I just gotta say, Audrey is not a procrastinator. Let me tell you that. She's everything is very organized. Okay, I just shout out to Audrey.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I mean, I try to be organized as much as possible. As a site, you have to stay on top of things. So
true, yeah. So you deserve that hoodie, So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Maybe one day you'll be a site and you'll get a hoodie.
Don't say that, because I'm like gonna get excited.
All right. So in addition to, being a student, I believe there are other organizations that med students can be involved in. So what kind of organizations can you be a part of? And are you volunteering anywhere right now?
So there's lots of, med students are involved in all sorts of different organizations, and I'm not aware of all of them, but just through med school, there's, you can be involved in the Doctors Manitoba. There's a vast student government, and there's a lot of different roles within the school. And then there's the MMSA, which is the Manitoba Medical Students Association, I believe. And there's lots of different roles in there. So you can be a part of medical school on a greater level. And can, be involved in like Doctors Manitoba and the MMSA, like control like how our medical school is shaped. If, you can have a voice in how programs evolve and stuff like that. So those are really, really big. And then you can also just be like, academic reps for the class, or each of the little blocks that we have, there's course reps, so that the class can communicate with one or two people who then talk with the course directors, rather than just the whole class flooding course directors with emails. So they have that really separated out. So there's a lot of, small little leadership add-ons that you can do. And some people take on a lot of those. Some people take on very few. Some people take on none. So yeah, I'm not sure if Aman has more things that he's involved in than I am. I'm not involved in much.
Yeah, so there's like the leadership stuff. There's also student interest groups, and there's a lot of them. So there's interest groups for like every specialty in medicine, like orthopedics, nephrology, cardiology. There's interest groups for all of them. And there's always like, I think 1 or 2 students from each first and second year of medicine who like control that, and they organize events where they bring in speakers to talk about the specialties. They organize like dinners. It used to be in-person dinners, now it's just like Zoom meetings with like different specialists in the field, either in Manitoba or outside. So there's those groups. And then like us, we're involved in Let's Talk Science through this program called Service Learning. So service learning itself, I don't know how many organizations there are, but there's like 20 plus organizations that you can choose from to be a part of. And there's also stuff like Wish Clinic, where I think through Wish Clinic you can give like flu shots every year. I don't know what happened this year. I think they had limited spots, but that's something you can get involved in. I don't know much about Wish Clinic because I haven't looked into that much, but yeah, there's like a lot of programs that you can be a part of.
It's great to hear that there's a lot of options for students to get involved. So as a second year med student thus far, what has been the most challenging part, and what is, I guess, one of your favorite parts of being a second year student thus far?
I guess I would say honestly that, this is a little uncreative because I think everybody's had a similar problem, but one of the most challenging part I think has just been the fact that you kind of have to go through it on your own. You don't get to be at school with people. You're very isolated. Other than that, I found second year med school to be a lot more laid back than first year med school was, just because, you've figured out how to study and you've gotten good habits in. So I think that the hardest part is just the socialization. Next year, we're out working on in the hospital, on the wards and seeing patients, and it's a much busier, more hectic time. And the kind of the social aspect of second year med school is nice, and we're going to miss it, and we won't really get that chance again to spend that extra time with our classmates. And so that's been hard, but I think probably my favorite part of second year med school has just been that now it's focused on diseases and disorders and how to fix them. And it's just like, I find it a lot easier to just keep track of, all right, there's disease X. This is how it presents in the hospital. This is what you do about it. This is how long it takes to get better. And this is the long-term outcome. And you can just go through things that way. And I find it to be an easier way of remembering things, just keeps everything structured.
Is there what have you found that's the most interesting disease that you've learned about in second year?
So for me, my favorite class, I think this might be coming up later, but my favorite class was neurology, that we took in second year. I just thought it was so interesting how people would come in and they would have, like numbness in a certain part of their hand, and that would tell you what nerves were affected. And if they had numbness on one side of their body and weakness on the other side of their body, that would tell you where in their nervous system the problem was. And it was just, it was all these neurological disorders, diagnosing them was like a fun puzzle. And you just kind of feel like Sherlock Holmes, like finding clues and going, okay, well, if there's that and that and that, well, that means, and then you can kind of do investigations to try and figure it out. And I thought that neurology was a really, really interesting puzzle. And so, yeah, that's, I guess, probably worth mentioning. I don't know whether it came up in the first year med school podcast episode, but there's something called an early exposure that we can do in the summer. And it goes to, so it's technically considered a course, but they're voluntary. And if you're interested in a field, what you do is you find a doctor that you can shadow for 2 weeks. So that just means, you go, they show you what they do and you follow them around. And, sometimes you do more things than other times. Sometimes you get to interview patients and, depending on what you're doing, you'll have a different experience. And then at the end, you get credit for doing them. And you get a bunch of experience for doing it. And it's a really good way to get a chance to figure out if you actually like something, because there's a difference between I like a class and I like that profession. And so that's something, the reason I bring that up is that's something that I'm going to be doing this summer, is doing an early exposure in neurology to see whether or not I like the field as much as I like the class.
Super cool.
It's a good way to put it too.
Yeah.
What you said about liking, the difference between liking a class and liking the profession. It's a good thing to keep in mind. Our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what about you, Aman? What was sort of the challenging part of second year med thus far, and what's your favorite part?
So apart from like the socialization aspect, I think a challenging thing for me has been, since I'm more of like a hands-on visual learner. And now that we're studying about like all the diseases and stuff, there's like a lot of things that would be better learned by like either seeing someone or like a patient who has that problem, or like seeing examples like in person. I think that's something that I've struggled with a lot. I've had to like go on YouTube to find like a bunch of videos and examples to learn that way, but it's still not the same. So I feel like my knowledge about those things is not as good as I would like. So that's like my main struggle in second year. And then for my favorite part, so my favorite course was also neuroscience, but then I think it's tied for me with nephrology. And then since Ian already talked about neuroscience, I like nephrology because it was kind of similar to neuroscience, where there's like a lot of like problem solving, but it's not like that Sherlock Holmes type. It's like, you're like chemistry scientist kind of thing, where you look at like acids and bases in the body and their balance and like stuff like that. So that spoke to like the inner scientist inside me, and I really love that. Like being able to like go back to my roots of like biochemistry and try to like solve those problems. So I really like that. So that's why, I haven't had my chance to like do those in-person like exposures yet, or like shadowing. And that's something that I was thinking this summer, actually, like shadowing a nephrology, like someone in nephrology, and see if I would actually like doing that as a profession.
Just to clarify, also nephrology for our high school listeners has to do with your kidneys, and neurology, of course, your nerves, nervous system and stuff. So that's really good. And I think for me personally, I'm particularly interested in cardiology, your heart, and that's my my interest. And I don't know, I feel like I've seen a lot of strokes and heart diseases in my own family. So that's why I wanted to learn more about it, and that just turned out to be my interest now. So I just have a question now from a grade 11 student named Ray Lee Torino. I think she asked a question from our previous episode as well. So thank you for sending your question again for our fourth episode. She's from Daniel McIntyre Collegiate. in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And her question is, what is the difference between your first year and second year of med school? So I guess um, we've touched a little bit about that, but maybe there's some the major differences that stand out more than others. Could you explain a little bit about those?
Yeah, I guess sort of. I think we've touched on a lot of different things and indirectly answered this throughout. But I guess to just sort of summarize it is, yeah, in first year you learn about the human body and how it works normally, and you learn a little bit about different diseases and how things can break down. But then in second year, you're very focused on diseases, disorders, pathologies, things that are wrong with people, and so the structure of the lectures is a lot different, and not in all of the classes, but it's less memorizing like anatomy and things like that, and more memorize. You learn a little bit more about medications and how to treat people, and you're given more complex problems where people have all sorts of different symptoms, and you need to figure out what's wrong with them based off of those symptoms. So second year is a little bit more geared in that direction. And I think since you're used to the workload at that point, and you're now you're learning a lot more, but you're also applying knowledge, it's a little bit more, I find it more enjoyable. If I could just put it simply, I think first year was more of a grind, and then second year has been a little bit more interesting. Yeah.
It's kind of like when you take anatomy and you take physiology the next year. I think that's the prerequisite for nursing in university if you're taking nursing at U of M. Yeah, it's more memorization for anatomy, and then physiology is more concept. Aman, do you have anything to add to that?
I think another different thing in second year is, since you've already learned the normal physiology and anatomy of all the body systems, when you're learning about diseases, there's you start to see there's these connections between different body parts and the different diseases that might present with same symptoms. So that's something really cool, where you can have let's say a patient with cough, but instead of just thinking about the lungs and lung problems, you think about heart, you think about any infections. So the interconnectedness of different body systems, that's something that comes up a lot more in second year, and that's something super interesting.
And sometimes the reason they're coughing is because they're on a medication that has a side effect that causes you to cough. And so, you can think about somebody comes in and there's all sorts of different reasons they can have whatever they have. And, second year, you kind of start teasing those apart, and it's more interesting.
I definitely agree. And that's what it seems like, right? It's so exciting to know that, you're a whole community, or and you have systems that make your body work, right? And we've talked a lot about, you guys as medical students or as doctors, and how you treat patients, right? And how you discover what's going on with their body. What about for your own body? What about as personally? How do you personally take care of your physical and mental health, given where we are now, and also, the stress that med school might bring to you? How do you take care of yourselves?
For me, I guess, honestly, the biggest main thing that I do is I go for a lot of walks. And it's so, I find that it was really hard. There was one stretch in the winter where it was it's just crazy, wicked cold for a couple of weeks. And so I didn't really get to go for a lot of walks. But my girlfriend is also in med school. And we both live in the same apartment building. And so we can, we have just been each other's person through the whole pandemic. So I got, that was very nice. I had another person that I could be with.
That's goals. Relationship goals.
Super well. It was the perfect time to both conveniently move into the same apartment building was right when the pandemic started. So so we go for a lot of walks. It's definitely hard. I felt the effects of it where, the same place that you're relaxing is the place where you're working, and it's, the lines get blurred really easily, and it can be really hard to motivate yourself to do the work that you need to do, and then you fall behind on things, and then you feel like an idiot for letting yourself fall behind on things, and it's not easy to do. And I think one thing that I think was helpful is if you have to be working at home, just have a space that's your workspace and a space that's your relaxing space, even if it has to be like separate sides of the couch or something. Just keep them distinct, because it makes your life a little easier.
That is interesting you brought that up, because I think, just a reference throwback to our previous The Farm Survival Guide podcast, I think I mentioned a book, Atomic Habits. It was mentioned there, if you guys remember. I mentioned there how you have to make that distinction of, what do you call it, designating a specific type of object or a place where you do a certain habit, so that when you're in that place, you only do that habit, right? So like in your bed, for example, that's why you shouldn't study in your bed, because you associate that with sleeping, right? So
it makes you tired while you're studying, and then it makes you anxious while you're sleeping, because you feel like you should be working because you're in your bed. It just totally throws you off. It's very Pavlovian. You just get conditioned, like, this is my place where I do this, and every time you're there, you do the work.
Pavlovian for you guys is psychology. Yeah, so conditioning.
It makes the dog drool, because every time rings the dog a treat, so the dog learns that a bell means it's going to get a treat. That's sort of the concept.
Pavlovian conditioning. Okay. Throwback once again.
Throwback, yeah.
What about for yourself, Aman?
So I've never really been good at taking care of my physical health, because I'm really lazy. But when the pandemic first started, like after like first couple of months, like in the summer, I made an active effort to exercise like just a little bit every day. And then I didn't know that the pandemic was just gonna, like keep going the way it did. So over time, that sort of stopped. Like the motivation was like at an all-time low at one point. But I still try to do like some stretches and whatnot from time to time. I don't really leave my house if I don't have to. So no walks for me, like Ian. But I still try to do some stretches. Could probably do more. But I do take care of my mental health for sure. And that's something, so that's like a habit I've built over like the course of like undergrad and then grad school, where I tried to put in some like meditation sessions for myself. Like, so when I first started doing it, it was like I had a schedule, like I have to do like 10 minutes every day, either when I'm stressed or like when I have free time. But now it's like I just do it whenever like I have free time. I sort of just close my eyes and then just, try to let go of the stress. And that's something that I find really helpful. And I also play a lot of video games, so that also takes a lot of my stress off. So yeah, I've definitely been paying a lot more attention to my mental health, since it's less effort than physical health, for sure.
True. And but also, stretching, you don't have to do a lot, right? Like it's better than doing nothing, right? You're doing stretches. That's exercise also, right? You don't necessarily have to go hardcore like bodybuilder, like lifting 500 pounds like I do, No, just kidding. I don't do that. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I haven't gone in a while because, like you said, it's pretty stressful. And I think my personal opinion is definitely put more attention towards your mental health, because then if your mental health is straight, right, then you're gonna be more motivated to perform physical activities and improve your physical health. So I think mental health is definitely important.
Yeah. And meditation really helps as well. I've been trying to do yoga, like this 30-day challenge, but it's so hard to like follow up on because life happens. And so that's kind of interrupted now, but I'm trying to get back on that. So I'm just wondering, what's a common myth about being a medical student that you would like to break down?
I guess probably the first thing that would come to my mind was just like the one of like, if you're in med school, you will have no life. Because up until this point, I mean, obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic, so nobody's got that crazy of a life right now. But and the first 2 years, like you can still totally have a life. And then even once you get into third year's a lot busier, you're in the hospital doing things. It's a lot crazier. But like you still have a life. My brother's in med school as well. He's in third year and he seems to have a pretty sweet life as well. So I think the whole that you just like work nonstop and you completely throw your life away, it's a myth. It's a lot of work and you have to try really hard, but you learn how to try hard and how to get everything done and how to balance your life and you adapt. And yeah, so you don't have to just throw your life away in order to do it. You can still have fun.
That's good to hear.
I think another myth is since getting into med school itself is really competitive and you're competing against like thousands of other students. People sometimes get this impression like it's gonna stay that way when you get in, but it's really different. Like once you get in, like the 110 of you in your class are like no longer competing with each other. You're all like in this together. Everyone's trying to help each other. And that's something you find out like from the very start. Because like the first unit you get into, it's like something new. No one's like experienced that before. Everyone's like on the same page, stress wise and workload wise. So you start like getting into that like, sense of camaraderie, like from the get-go. And that's something that I wish more people knew before getting in. And I think that would like put their minds to ease. Like it's very friendly.
Yeah, and I think that's the fact that it's a pass-fail program means it's just like nobody's competing with anybody. It doesn't matter if you get a 70 or a 90, you're getting a P. And so it's all the same thing. So yeah, like when people make notes, they post them for the entire class to see. And when people are having trouble, they post a question to the entire class and people answer it. Everybody just is trying to help everybody else out as best they can. And it's a very, very nice, like working and learning environment.
That's really nice to hear. Because in the real world, when you do become a doctor, you guys have to work as a team together, right? And there is no competition. With that being said, it's actually time for our rapid fire segment. Ramir, are you ready?
Yeah, we just made this up on the spot.
on the spot, yeah.
Okay, so the point of this is we're just gonna ask questions, and just the first thing that pops up to your mind, that's the answer. So are you guys ready?
Are you directing like one at a time to each of us or free for all answer?
We can do like Ian, you can go first and then Aman.
Goes next.
Each question is for both of you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, you ready? Okay. So first question. Favorite course in high school?
Debating. Oh wait, do I get why? I just loved the teacher.
Yeah, favorite course.
Yeah, favorite course was debating in high school. I absolutely loved the teacher. His name was Mr. Robinson at SJR, and he was just the absolute best. So that's what was my favorite course.
Cool.
Shout out, Mr. Robinson.
Shout out.
My favorite was pre-cal. I love trigonometry, and that was my jam. I still miss it. I always like look up trig problems every now and then.
Awesome.
Just throwback.
All right. Thank you for your answer. Second question. Favorite course during second year of med school?
Oh, that would be neuroscience too. And that was the one that I was talking about earlier.
I think mine overall would be clinical reasoning. It's a course where you sort of put like all your knowledge from all your other courses together, and you have like patient scenarios, and you have to figure out what's either like what's the next best step or what's their most likely diagnosis. I really love that course.
Good one too. It's
Wow.
fun.
Okay, third question. I guess this is more for Ian, I guess, but Aman, you have your favorite meal. Favorite meal to cook.
Oh my goodness. Okay, my favorite meal to cook is something that I've never cooked before because my favorite thing about cooking is trying new things and experimenting with it. It's very sort of like creative science, like those two combined into one. And so I love trying out new things and trying to do something I've never done and seeing if I can make it work. And sometimes it's like, oh, this doesn't work, and other times. So that's cooking my creative science outlet. So
a dish that you haven't even named.
yes, just something random. Like my favorite thing is to just go to I'll go to the grocery store and walk around the produce department without a list and just see what looks good and then try and come up with something that uses those ingredients. And that's the most fun for me.
Oh man, that's awesome. What about
That
you, Aman?
sounds so much fun.
Mhm.
So I make really good grilled cheese sandwiches. So that's like my go-to thing if I can't think of anything. But I actually have a question for our chef Ian here.
Hey.
So actually, like the other day, I was watching this like video game stream because I was trying to learn like this new game, and there were these people talking about grilled cheese sandwiches, and apparently you can put mayonnaise on your on the bread instead of like butter or margarine. And I want to ask Ian, is that like a real thing? Because like thinking about it, I don't know if it'll taste good.
So that's something that I've seen in that context, and I've had it in other contexts. It's definitely a real thing. I've had it before where you make a topping for fish using mayonnaise and some breadcrumbs and garlic and all sorts of other things, and then you bake it, and then it creates like a nice crust on the fish. And so I would guess that it's a similar concept. I've never tried it, but I feel like it would be good.
Okay, maybe I'll give it a try then.
Yeah, you can try it, and then we'll come back and we can discuss results.
Okay.
Part two.
Aman is gonna switch his courses to culinary.
All right.
It sounds so interesting.
Yeah.
I'd probably love it. I love eating. I don't like cooking because you spend so much time cooking and then it takes like 5 or 10 minutes to just like eat it all. So I feel like I'm good with like the eating part of it. I got that down.
I'm the other way around. I find sometimes I go through the entire elaborate process of cooking something and then I'm like, oh, I'm tired now. I put so much work into it.
But it makes it worth it, right?
Yeah. And I get to taste it the whole way along too.
True. All right. Our third rapid question, fourth. What superhero would you compare yourself to?
I mean, I guess the closest one that I could come to, like, if I'm being very literal, would be, I guess, Doctor Strange.
That's cool.
Because he was a neurologist.
Yeah.
I'm interested in neurology. He's a wizard. I'm not a wizard, but there's some similarities.
That's a hard one. I love superheroes, man. I feel like this might be my like recent bias from watching 4 hours of Justice League.
No, I knew it.
I really like Batman. It's like, so like Batman and Iron Man are like so similar in the sense like they're just like rich, smart people who have like all this disposable income to make like cool gadgets. But I just like about Batman, I just like his, like from the comic books, I like that like detective aspect of his stories. And I feel like the movies don't show that much, but I really love that. I have like the mindset of like problem solving and like, finding little clues and like leading up to the big thing. So I'd say Batman, but I feel like I'm biased from like the recent movie.
Oh yeah, you definitely are, but that's all right. That's all right. But no, Batman is cool though. I think I would pick Batman too, out of Justice League, the whole Justice League. So
It would be cool to be so rich that you're considered a superhero. You know, like there's
Oh
nothing
yeah.
whatsoever, but yeah,
yeah, I think that's the reason why they are called that. Because all right, so for our last rapid question. So we talked about the myths earlier. What myth do you know has turned out to be true
About med school.
about med school? Yes.
I would go with the fact that you like. Everybody always told me before going into med school, like, oh yeah, you'll make super close friends, and I was kind of, you know, especially I was 27 going into it. I was like, all right, I'm a little older. I think I'm going to get here and just do my work and put my head down. And I was very surprised that the orientation week, by the time that was done, it's just everybody gets to know everybody very quickly. And so although I was very skeptical that I would make a bunch of close friends, I made very close friends very quickly when I started med school. And so, you know, that was a myth or what I thought was a myth that turned out to be true.
That's great to hear. What about you, Aman?
So this, again, like it's just my personal experience, but I was told that, so when I first applied to medical school after my bachelor's, and I didn't get in that time, so I enrolled into like grad school and did that, and then I was told by a bunch of people who knew like other students who had trained in our labs and who went on to do medical school, and I was told that they found medical school to be a bit less challenging than their peers just because of that experience. And I do feel like now going through like the first 2 years, I do think that's that has some truth to it. And I think then it's again due to like all that extra experience that you end up getting as compared to like the undergrad students. So I feel like that is, I would say that's definitely like true. The more experience you have, the easier you find things going forward.
All right, awesome, interesting. All right, so thank you guys so much for participating in our rapid fire segment. We are on our last question of the day, and we usually like to ask our guests this every episode. So what advice can you give to our listeners who are mostly high school students or they're at the beginning of their university journey? What advice can you give them if they're interested in going to medicine, or not even medicine, maybe in healthcare or any profession that they're passionate about? What advice can you give them on how to stay motivated and not to give up on their dreams?
I guess probably my best advice would be relax a bit. You know, people I think are, you know, especially in high school, like it's important to work hard at school, but you don't need to be killing yourself to get like the absolute best grades possible. If you're trying to get into a university that's really hard to get into and you need higher grades, like then set that as your goal. But when you just set like an infinite goal on yourself, you're like, I need to get the highest grades that I possibly can. No, you don't. Like right now, it's also very important that you enjoy life and have hobbies and see your friends. And, you know, like when you look back over the years, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm so glad that I never went out and never did anything. You'll go, oh, I probably worked a little bit harder than I needed to. So as long as you're doing well in school, like set goals based off of the marks that you're going to need and the marks that you're going to be happy with. If you have scholarships, work towards those and everything, but don't absolutely kill yourself especially when you're in high school, trying to just get the absolute highest possible grades that you can. I think there's a lot of people who get to med school and realize once you're here, it's like, you know, the first 2 years are a little bit more laid back, and then third year is busy, and then fourth year is a little bit different now with COVID. But then after that, you're in your residency. So once you start med school, you're on the train and it's moving at a set pace, and you run out of the free time at a certain point to enjoy life and do hobbies and travel and use your breaks to the best of your abilities. So take advantage of life and don't stress too much. It'll all work out.
I wish I knew that when I was in high school.
Yeah, I came from a very roundabout route. I went to culinary school and came back in, and I think it's given me a very interesting perspective on all of these things. And so, yeah, not saying delay things and go off and do a job that you don't want to do for a bunch of years and then come back to med school, but try new things and enjoy the time that you've got.
Just a comment. I do want to say though, I feel like in high school I was a little bit too loose. To make sure you get your priorities, but also, don't, like Ian said, don't overstress yourself. So, but still get your job done.
Yeah, set goals and then work towards those. But sometimes when you just think I'll just work as hard as I possibly can, you wind up working way harder than you need to.
What about yourself, Aman?
Something that I wanna or like an advice that I'd want to give, not just like high school students, but like this is something I tell like everyone, including myself, is don't let failures keep you down. And in my life, like I found whenever I've failed at something to be like the best learning experience for me. Just take some time, like off from it. Don't think about it for like a little bit, and then go back to it and reflect on it, see what you did wrong, and just try to figure out like what you can improve on. That's something that I definitely did with like my interview, that the first time I didn't do really good, and then it's something like you get upset, and like I was definitely upset, but you just have to let it go for a bit, and then like go back and see what you can do better. And life's really long, and you're bound to have a few failures every now and then, and just don't let them get in the way of your dreams.
That's great advice. I also stick by to that as well. Every failure is a learning experience, and I really agree with that. Mm-hmm.
As LeBron James once said, minor setback for a major comeback, right? So that being said, I'd just like to thank the both of you for joining us today in our episode 4 of the Med podcast.
Survival Guide.
Med Survival Guide, yes. And yeah, thank you so much. And for our listeners, I'd like to thank you also for listening. Remember to follow us at LTS_U of M on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook to be updated on our upcoming events. And also feel free to follow us and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcasts in. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, we're everywhere. And yeah, thank you once again, Ian and Amandeep.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day on a Saturday to spend time with us on our podcast. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you
Good
guys.
luck to all the listeners and whatever they decide to do ultimately.
Whatever you want to do, you can do it. So just figure out what you want to do and then do it.
Great advice.
There you go.
All right.
You guys have a good rest of the day.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
On the next episode.
And then from there, you can decide whether you do a fellowship or any further training. And then you will become a staff doctor or an attending doctor at the end of the day. So it's a pretty long road. And so it's very important to kind of go one step at a time, because the big picture can be pretty overwhelming. Actually, so funny. I'm currently reading this book. I just picked it up. One of my colleagues mentioned it. It's by Dr. Horton. She's actually an internist here in Manitoba who wrote this book. So it should be a good read. It's about, the challenges in medicine and a memoir of love and medicine and healing. So I think that's going to be probably my newest read, how Black patients have been left behind by healthcare. I think we have to look back into the history. So for instance, in dermatology, we don't really look at skin disorders or skin diseases and how they present on Black people. By history, we haven't really been able to pick up these nuances on Black skin because we've never really been taught that. What ends up happening is, Black people will be underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed and things like that. And as a result, maybe Lyme disease isn't caught, and then they kind of have to deal with the consequences, which can be dire and difficult, right?